Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Factory Must Grow, episode 23. Today we are joined by NotNotMelon, Pyanodons developer. How are you doing today, NotNot?
Amazing. I'm calling here from the Johnson Space Center, Houston, Texas. So
Oh, that's
feels good.
so cool. Welcome from Houston, Texas, and the Space Center nonetheless. Perfect. Well, today on the cast, we'll start with another mod spotlight. As usual, we'll discuss the recent Factorio Friday facts, which are a little bit lighter now that the game's released. And then we're going to talk a lot about Pyanodons and some other mods today with Not, but it's going to be really interesting because for those who don't know, Pyanodons is a mod for Factorio. It's been around for quite a while now, and it's a bit infamous for its I'll use the word absurd difficulty, so we'll talk about that quite a bit today. But first, I want to thank the show's patrons. This show is possible because of Patreon supporters, and I just want to thank each and every one of you. You guys are really just keeping things running here. So if you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can head over to patreon.com/Krydax, and there are different benefits and such there, but I'll let you guys look into that. So I want to talk mod spotlight wise about the Pyanodons hard mode, because obviously we're going to talk a lot about Pyanodons, but it's already the hardest mod, and we're going to talk a lot today about the difficulty and kind of your take on that. But first I want to hear from you, what even is Pyanodons hard mode? Because Pyanodons is already hard mode.
Yeah. So a lot of games are hard. Like you have to have very precise inputs, or you have to have a certain skill level or amount of practice. Pynodons is not that. Pynodons, the difficulty comes from you just have to manage all these chains and organize your factory in the right way. So it's a very different type of difficulty, I would say, to a lot of other games out there.
Yeah, but
High hard
why?
mode.
Yeah.
High hard mode is it definitely extends that playtime. I would say by around 300 hours, which is extremely significant. But the reason it was made, and it was born out of a desire for no voiding. So many players, we have all these byproducts, right? And in regular pie, it's easy. You just throw a sinkhole, you throw a gas vent, and it's not a problem. But in hard mode, that's not how it works. You have to actually deal with every single byproduct, tie up every single loose end. So you're constantly chasing down these threads, which I think is fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So then the target audience for Pi hard mode is people that really like Pyanodons, and they're looking for kind of that extra challenge, which is just funny to say because that's already Pyanodons. But it does make sense. You know, voiding is something that, for example, the Nullius mod pack, they kind of went down that same road that you're talking about as Pi hard mode, where voiding is part of the actual challenge baked into the game. You can't just void things whenever you want. And I actually found that to be really interesting. So are you aiming to make, do you actually add new recipes with Pi hard mode, or is it just using the existing stuff that's already in the game?
So I've actually added about 100 custom recipes to void various products that you would get throughout the game that otherwise you would just have no use for. Like, for example, you get vanadium pulp stage one at the very first stage of vanadium, but there's no way to process it. So regular games, you just have to throw it in a sinkhole. I've added more ways to process it into useful materials.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like that. So yeah, for those who are looking for that extra little bit of challenge, or I think it's not even necessarily about the challenge. I think some people like the realism of not just being able to void things. And I don't know if you're in that camp or it's more just about the gameplay, but I do think it's kind of cool when things work a bit more realistically like that, where it's like, oh, you can't just dump these caustic materials into a hole in the ground.
Well, I would say with that, there is sort of it's a give and take because you also can't void like oxygen and nitrogen. So
Oh.
um,
Yeah, that's funny because obviously in real life that's pretty easy to do. You just dump them in
yes,
the atmosphere.
and
So
I'm not
then,
sure.
why did you make hard mode? That's my next question.
Well, in a way, it's sort of a testing ground for new experimental features that get added into the main branch of Python. So, for example, like there was a spoilage thing that I added when 2.0 came out, and people seem to really like it. So eventually, some of those features we decided to actually implement into the alternative energy. So it could sort of be seen as a more experimental version of the main line.
to kind of see if it's like, is this too hard and not fun, or is this actually the right amount of hard and therefore fun?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well let's move on real quick to the Friday facts, and then we'll get back to some Pyanodons chat. These are pretty short, so FFF 436 and 437. First one's titled "Lost in Translation," and basically, this is all about non-English language support, which I love that they do. I can't comment too much on it because I play the game in English, and I don't. I'm one of those classic Americans who doesn't know any other languages. And so, I think it's really cool that they're working on making sure these other like characters are supported properly in searches and stuff like that. So the gameplay feels the same, regardless of what language you're playing on. I think that's all awesome, but it's not, too crazy interesting to sit here and talk about all they mentioned in the FFF because it's just better support for languages. And then the second FFF was quite a bit more interesting to read through because it was all about how they did the cargo pod animation. So for those who haven't played Space Age to that point yet, when you launch a rocket, you get a really cool, I'll call it a cutscene. It's not technically a cutscene the way the game works, but it's basically a cutscene of like you are going up in the rocket and then they show the little cargo pod, once you escape the atmosphere, it does the like stage 2 separation and you fly over and land in the space station. And then there's kind of a reverse version of that when you go from the space station down to the ground on any planet. And so it's a really cool kind of cutscene thing, and they deep dove on like how they actually made that work in the game, and they had some cool details and sketches. It was kind of like one of those behind the scenes Friday facts from before the game was out. And I think what's cool, and I don't know, did you read this FFF, Melon?
I did, and I was terrified.
Terrified because now you have to figure out how to mod it.
Exactly. I think there's a few points in the modding API that are hard. You have noise expressions, you have cliffs, and now there's this, which is going to be another can of worms that I'm actually excited to dive into, but I'm worried it's going to take all of my time.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, on this note, because basically what they mention in the FFF is that some of these capabilities that they use to make this cutscene are accessible to modders. And you can, you could make, for example, if you had a new planet, you could make the clouds look different, and that would be really easy to do. At least I think I was reading that right. I didn't totally understand all of it. So the question is, are you then immediately thinking of like, how can we add cutscenes into Pyanodons?
That and also some of my other projects that I've been working on with other planets. So it's going to be a
Yeah.
journey to get this figured out.
Sweet. Well, I love to hear it. Well, let's kind of dive in. Before we talk about the big Pyanodon sized elephant in the room, let's talk about you a little bit. Who are you? What do you do?
So I'm a college student right now in the computer science program, and I'm almost about to graduate. I'm really looking forward to just all the possible prospects in the Houston area and also beyond. So I'm familiar with tons of different software. So Rust is a big one that's new and upcoming that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah,
Which
that's I don't know anything about Rust, but I've heard of it. It sounds cool. So how did you get into modding then?
this is actually something I've been doing for, I would say, 13 years at this point. I started with The Binding of Isaac. I was like, hey, this is in Lua. I could probably learn programming. Let's try it out. And that's how I got my start. And eventually I realized that maybe this Factorio thing could be fun too. So I migrated there, and that's history.
Okay, so when did you start modding Factorio then? Like how many years ago?
That would be 8 years ago. Eight
Wow.
years ago.
So
So
you've been into
2016.
Factorio for a while now.
I would say so. Yes.
Yeah. Do you mod any other games currently, or have you kind of switched wholly over to Factorio?
Um, I experimented a little bit with the whole Minecraft fabric stuff, but it wasn't for me. So Factorio, that's my bread and butter.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So what other mods have you made? I know, we'll talk about Pi a lot, but what are some of your other projects that you've worked on?
It's interesting that you asked that. If you go to my mod page, probably 2 out of the 3 pages are just deprecated, deprecated, deprecated. So on my portal, there's a lot of churn, I would say. There's a lot of ideas that I have. I realize that I don't want to support this anymore, and then it gets scrapped. Um, so the only things that are left, which I would say are like the diamonds in the rough. My probably biggest achievement is Factorissimo 3, which just came out, and it's awesome. Uh, if you've never played Factorissimo, basically it adds functional programming into Factorio. You can have these units where there's specific inputs and outputs, and you can duplicate these units with the exact same interior over and over again. It's really cool.
So yeah, I'd like to ask, because we've talked about Factorissimo before on the podcast, and I've played with Factorissimo. I actually, my first Pyanodons season run was with Factorissimo enabled. So what does Factorissimo 3 change from 2? I think is the salient question.
So there is quite a long list. First, the first big one that took most of my time is performance optimizations. So
Mm-hmm.
Factorissimo 2 basically does everything on tick. The belts are teleported every single tick. The chests are on tick. The fluids are teleported every tick. The electricity is updated every tick. In Factorissimo 3, they've added all these new API features that just let the engine handle it for you, which basically means that my version of the mod is, I would say, up to 15 times more performant in a lot of cases.
Wow, that's a lot. So that's obviously different, but you also, I know you changed a couple other things too, right?
Yeah. So the biggest feature I would say that's for Space Age specifically is we had really good support for the remote view. So you can actually have construction robots fly into the factory buildings, build machines, and then leave.
Wait, what? Are you serious?
Yeah, seriously.
Oh my goodness. Because that literally, if you, I don't know which episode of the podcast it was, but when I was talking about this, or maybe I didn't even mention it, but when I was playing my Pi season, I certainly mentioned it. That was the reason I actually didn't want to keep using Factorissimo. It actually became more of a burden than a help, because it's like, oh, I want to upgrade all the buildings inside of my Factorissimo like structures, but I can't do that without walking inside of them and manually doing it. But now you don't have to do that?
Exactly. Yeah, so full disclosure, I actually was watching your Pi series and I was like, wait a minute, this Factorissimo thing is not working very well. What can I do to fix it? So,
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I'm actually really excited to hear that. That's really cool. Um, I will have to check that out. So, all that to say, Factorissimo 3 is awesome. Now, I also saw you have a beekeeping mod.
oh, oh boy. That was the very first mod I ever made, and I'm gonna be honest, it's not very good. It has a cult following. It does have a cult following, but the cult does not include myself, which means it's very hard for me to find motivation to improve it. Uh,
Yeah, I get that. You kind of made something that other people liked more than you did.
yes, very much so.
What does it do?
So you have these queens that you can breed, and it's kind of an RNG mechanic. So you have this genetic apparatus, and then so every ore added by mods, it actually automatically detects these and adds production chains based on those algorithm. And you have like a 1% chance to get, say, a Vita Melange queen. And then using this queen, you could somehow, there's a bee processing chain to get the raw resources out of that. So essentially, the whole point of it is to reduce your dependence on ore patches and allow for a zero input base,
Was
essentially.
it inspired by the bee stuff in Minecraft?
So no, actually, I've never played the forestry mod, but people who have played both say that they're very similar, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, that's actually really cool, because I don't know. I did play Greg Tech New Horizons, but I didn't get into the whole bee thing that much recently. So I'm still not exactly sure how they work, but I do think it's the same essence of that for sure. That's cool.
Yeah.
So one more mod project apart from Pyanodons that I want to ask you about before we get to the big elephant is what is Meraxis?
Oh, this is a very exciting one for me. I have been actually working since before the game 2.0 even came out on a brand new planet. The whole premise is you actually go underwater. The whole planet is underwater, and you only transfer materials through like submarines and fiber optic cables. There's pressure domes that you actually build your factory in that you have to constantly keep upkeep with gases. There's tropical fish. It's quite a cool project. I'm very, very close to being able to release it, and the new noise technology that Arundel's added for 2.0 makes everything 100 times easier. You can just make beautiful terrain just so easily. It's incredible what you're able to do with the new API. So
That's really cool. Are there what types of terrain are there on your underwater planet then?
yeah, we have we have coral reefs, we have like plains, and we also have these deep sea trenches that you can submerge your submarine and you go down like hundreds of kilometers. And then you get to this trench surface, which has lava, and it has these eels that try to attack your factory.
That's
So,
super cool. So is this going to be like a planet add-on that you'll play alongside the other planets, or is it like a separate overhaul sort of mod?
so this is a fully contained thing. The whole idea is you have like a finished space age base, and you're like, I want to continue this save, but I've already gone to all the planets. What can I do? Let me just install this mod, and it just works.
Awesome. So it's a post Aquilo, actually?
Yes, that's correct. Well, it's at the same time as Aquilo, so you could also install it after Gleba, but
Okay.
yeah.
Sweet. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see that. And I know there are many other planet mods in the works. I think it'll be cool to have eventually just this awesome like repository of like, oh, I can add 15 different planets to my game and just have this like never ending Factorio journey. Um, I'm sure that'll happen. So on to Pyanodons. Let's
Oh boy.
we've definitely chatted on the podcast a bit about it, but it's never been a mod we've like just straight talked about for most of an episode, but I think it certainly deserves it. So for the viewers or listeners who don't know, Pyanodons is a mod for Factorio. It's been out for I didn't look up how many years now, but it's quite a few years, and it started out almost at least in the community, because I didn't play it for a long time, but it was kind of a joke, almost this like, oh, it's just someone added a billion recipes to the game for fun. And that's kind of what it sounded like. But the longer it went, the more kind of things got ironed out. And, the initial release wasn't that, I would say it wasn't that balanced and such, but it really has taken hold of the community as like, oh, this is kind of the pinnacle of difficulty, but it's also really well done. And I think I've noticed in the last, I guess now it's been the last 3 or 4 years, a big shift in the design of Pynodons. I think alternative energy, the release of that really kind of, it overhauled the tech tree to be less janky. Like a lot of the jank was removed and it felt more professional in a way. So that being said, Pi is a huge mod pack. What is your take on like what is Pyanodons? How would you describe it?
Pyanodons is a Zen garden. So it's only a
Ooh.
3 hour mod pack. It's just that those 3 hours you play it every single day until you're finished. It's like you're growing this thing and you just sort of have it in the background. And eventually, before you know it, you've actually finished the pack. That's
So
what everyone who's beat it has described it this way to me. So
So it's a journey, not a destination, to beat Pyanodons.
definitely, definitely.
I like that. Now, the regarding the difficulty, what's your take? Like, is it as hard as people say?
It's harder. So to be honest, we keep adding stuff. We can't help ourselves. And very recently, we've added spoilage into Pi.
Okay.
Um, so there are now over 100 items that spoil into other things. Uh, and if you look at Factoriopedia, and if you go to the Alien Life tab, the scroll bar with the amount of recipes, it's like 3 pixels.
That's very scary. So yeah, Pyanodons is very hard. Most of the people that I've seen complete the pack since you guys released Alternative Energy, we're talking in the like 800 to 1500 hour range for playtime.
That's
Um,
good, yes.
Yeah. So one question I have for you though is there are multiple Pyanodons devs. So what's your role, or kind of even how do the roles work? Do you all just kind of do what needs to be done? Do you each have specific like lanes where you kind of only do that sort of thing for the work, or how does that all operate?
Yeah, we all have, I would say, specialties. So Pi himself, he's an amazing 3D artist. He uses 3D Max Studio, and he's made essentially all the art in Pi, which is just gorgeous. King Arthur, he's really good with the like realistic recipes, chemistry. He's basically designed, I would say, 80% of all the actual recipe chains. So the meat of the mod pack. Me, I focus on more like, let me make sure the game runs properly. Let me fix all these bugs that constantly appear. Let me improve the graphics definitions, that kind of thing. And I could go all day, but we have, I would say, almost 8 members at this point, and we all have our specific roles that all come together to make this game as good as possible.
That's awesome. So then how does the regarding like the gameplay design decisions of like, oh, we're going to add this new ore, we're going to add this new recipe, or we're going to add this new part of the tech tree, is that something you all kind of do together, or is that mostly Pi, or is that like Pi and King Arthur? How does that all work?
So anyone can essentially just commit directly to master, which sounds like chaos, but we usually have review processes afterwards. Things get reverted. We really try to maintain backwards compatibility with old bases because could you imagine the scenario? You've built this thing for 800 hours, this mysterious commit comes, and suddenly your entire factory is broken. We really try to avoid that scenario when adding new features. So
That makes sense. That makes sense. So then, so okay, regarding the difficulty itself, you guys are working to make an experience that's very difficult. Like that's kind of one of the purposes of it, obviously. However, a lot of people I've seen make the argument, and I'm guessing you will have a rebuttal to this, but a lot of people on Reddit or whatever, people are talking Pi, and people are like, "Oh, Pi isn't hard; it's just tedious." What's your take on that?
I would say that people who say this have not actually played the mod. In a vast majority of cases, this is what I've seen. So you get started and you're like, oh, what do I need for this science? I need this one small thing. Let me build it. And then oh, I just need this other really quick build. And then suddenly 10 hours have passed. That's my experience. So it's peak Cractorio in that way, which is why I actually started programming for this mod.
Yeah, so did your interest come from playing it? You just really enjoyed the mod pack and you're like, "Oh, I want to help make this better."
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with Pyanodons, for me, I think it offers a different experience. Yes, there are incredibly, I mean, you could use the word tedious recipe chains in the sense that like, oh, I have all the basic resources I need to make thing X, but I have to craft A, B, C, and then A, B, and C get combined with these other three things, and then that makes D, E, and F. And then D has to go over to this other area where I'm doing these other things, and then that makes thing L. And then it's like 15 recipes later, you're making thing X finally. And none of that is complex in the sense that it is just using assembling machines to make more stuff. But the thing that Pyanodons does that I've always loved is it often provides multiple ways to make the same output. And I think that's one of the cooler things. Is that one of your design decisions, is to like have multiple recipe chains for everything?
Absolutely. So basically, a lot of the main products have tons of different pathways, ways that you can sort of theory craft your entire base. We added the turd system, which really reinforces this. Basically, if you haven't played the mod, every single animal and plant in the mod has this basically choose your own adventure. So you have 3 different upgrades that totally change the recipes, and you have to pick one, and you're stuck with that for the entire game. So essentially, you're always like micro optimizing these chains and trying to do calculations on which process would be more efficient for my factory or some other factory. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What factory planner do you use to help you with all of this nonsense?
So as a dev, I'm essentially using all of the factory planners because Pi has to support them all. Like Factory Planner always has issues that I have to fix. Helmod has issues that I have to fix. YAFSA has issues that I have to fix. But I would say in when I'm just personally playing through the mod, YAFSA is the way to go.
And that's the one that's a separate software program that you actually have on your computer, right?
That's right. It's written in C sharp.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. I've never gotten into it because as a streamer it's hard to like, I'd have to have like a separate window pop up and it's just so much easier to use something like Helmod that's in game. But I have heard YFC has a lot of power that the other factory planners just don't. So, one thing about Pyanodons that I've always wondered about is, are you guys focusing on tailoring the early game more than the rest of it because most players only get like 100 hours in or less?
I think if you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would say yes. But at this point, the early game is essentially a finished product. Like it's extremely enjoyable. So we're moving now towards actually high in space. So you can visit new planets, you can build spaceships. We want to have full space age compatibility, and obviously a lot of this gameplay would be more towards the later game.
Yeah, so how do you I guess the first question I'll ask is just how do you deal with space age? Like Pynodons was this big beast, long before space age came along, and now space age is out. What do you do with that? Are you going to try to integrate it so that you can play Pyanodons and still do like Gleba and Aquilo and all that, or are you going to make your own set of planets and you just kind of won't use that?
So what we've actually done is we've added compatibility with the space age, but we've deleted Vulcanus, Novice, Aquilo, and Gleba, and we've added new planets, which are very exciting. They all have their own mechanics, so
Okay, and that's called Pi Stellar Expedition, is that right?
that's correct.
Okay. And then so then with that, I guess the other question I have is like how have you guys felt about 2.0? Like were you really excited with 2.0 coming? Was it like, "Oh no, now we're going to have to change everything?"
Fluid extents. Fluid extents were they they took a lot of effort to make work in Pi. Uh, so we have these valves, right? We have overflow valves, we have the underflow valves, and there was a lot of effort to actually get these ported into 2.0, and we couldn't. We couldn't do it because of the new fluid system. So that was the major con for us, but everything else has been great. We were actually given beta access to port Pyanodons before the game was even out, so the amount of commits that went through right before was just a nonsense number. You can look at my GitHub. There's a solid green dot on that day. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I know the new fluid system definitely messed with the valves. I remember reading that in, one of the posts on the Pynodons Discord of like, yeah, the valves are just not going to work, but someone made it work, right?
someone did, yeah. String Weasel actually. He made a third-party mod that you can install into Pi, and you just get the valves again, which is amazing.
Yeah, because overflow and underflow valves, especially, being adjustable by percentage as well, like being able to overflow if the input's more than 80% full or 50% full, that makes it so easy to do fluid priorities, because we have these splitters um, for belts, but we don't have anything like that for fluids, and having the valves, the overflow and underflow kind of made that possible. So I'm really glad that's still in the game.
Definitely.
So one question, I say one question. I've got a million. So with Space Age, did you guys have the plans for Stellar Expedition? Did that kind of evolve along with Space Age, or did you plan it before Space Age and Space Age happened? Like, how did that all work? What's the timeline look like?
So we've actually been working on Pi Space for over 5 years at this point. So before even Space Age was a thing in Woob's mind, we were already working on this Pi in space. So, and now it's just sort of all the prototypes are all coming together so we can actually implement a lot of these ideas. So it's just really like a boost for us, I would say, in that way.
Yeah. So then, did anything happen with Space Age where it's like, oh crap, that's actually going to like make this thing we really wanted for PySpace not possible, or has it kind of just merged really well with y'all's plans?
I will say there has been a lot of scrapped ideas. For example, we originally had a procedurally generated universe, but then we played the space age, and we realized, like compared to space exploration, that just set planets is you can just put a lot more content into them and make them way more synergized better, way more interactive. So we're going to go with the set seed universe in that way.
Right, where there's like a fixed amount of planets and each planet has a fixed thing rather than a bunch of random planets.
Right, right. Exactly.
I like that. I think it, kind of what you were just saying, like it works really well. You look at something like Satisfactory, and I think a lot of its success comes from having a handcrafted map. Um, the replayability that random seeds offer is often kind of samey anyway. I feel like with space exploration, that's how it is. Anyway, it's like, oh, you have to find a planet with cryonite, and it kind of doesn't really matter what that planet looks like. But
Exactly. There's also
so
a benefit of having like a shared vocabulary. You don't say, "Oh, I just went to the Cryonite planet. I went to like say Gleba. That's my planet." So that helps a lot too.
for sure, yeah, I actually think that's a really interesting topic too. Takes my brain to a whole new place with Pyanodons because it's such a hard mod pack. People are all over the place adding in even more helper mods. What's your take on like should you play Pyanodons without like I know Bold Viking for example, he's played Pyanodons with basically zero quality of life mods. And then there are people like that go way farther than even I have to get all the quality of life mods. Where do you land on that spectrum?
I think you should go nuts. I think you should just go completely nuts with the quality of life. The reason why is we've designed Pi to be extremely extensible and basically work with everything. So if you want something, just install it. That's my 2 cents.
I love it. Go nuts. Yeah, so uh, with Pyanodons, um, is there such a thing? I guess I sorry. Okay, I'm getting a little out of line here with my questions. With the development of the space age stuff, because that's what we're talking about right now. Are you guys planning to make it like a set order of planets, or is it going to be kind of like vanilla space age is right now, where it's like, oh, there's like a set of planets that are all kind of equivalent, and you can pick your order?
Uh, I don't feel comfortable answering that one at this time.
Totally get it. That's fine.
Yeah.
So then I guess with the design of like Pyanodon's difficulty, how hard is too hard? Like how do you know when you guys have gone too far and something's just not fun versus like, oh, this is like properly difficult?
Yeah. So there's lots of times when you're just essentially spamming one machine, one recipe. A lot of Pi is designed so you'll need like maybe 10 machines max of a certain process, and then that's all you'll need for the entire playthrough. If it ever goes to unreasonable amounts, then we can say this process probably needs to be retuned or made less complex.
So for
Essentially,
you it's kind of like about scale. If the scale is getting too big, that might mean something's off.
not scale, repetition. We want to avoid repetition.
I see. Yeah, I like that for sure. What are some other just kind of on that design note? What are some other things you guys are like trying to mitigate or maximize in your design of Pyanodons?
We we have the whole alternative energy mod, and a lot of the power sources I would say are maybe not as useful. Like, for example, we have solar energy, and we also have solar thermal energy, which are very similar. And in fact, you would also almost never want to use the basic solar panel. One of our biggest goals in the next PyMod is to separate each of the planets. You have like very specific power sources that you're allowed. And this way, I think alternative energy would be allowed to shine more because you're sort of trying to experiment with everything now. And how can I optimize this for energy usage?
Right. But then I guess the question is, how do you not go too far and make it so the player only has one choice? Because then they feel pigeonholed, right?
I would definitely say that the amount of power options in alternative energy is far greater than the amount of planets we're looking to add.
Nice, nice. That makes sense. So then, how do you guys determine? So like, I just Pyanodons is such an interesting beast, and for you listeners, I kind of had this take on Greg Tech New Horizons as well when I talked about that, and I even did on YouTube a review video of it. Despite being a 6,000 hour mod pack, it really is a Zen garden, like you described with Pyanodons, and I think Pi is this thing that it, even if you're scared of it, it's worth giving it a try if it sounds interesting. Because even though it's really difficult, as long as you have, a few of your helper mods like Factoriopedia and Max Rate Calculator. Well, Factoriopedia is not a mod anymore, but you have these helper mods. It really is fun to try out because Pi offers so many choices, and the way that you do things just feels different. So anyway, all that to say, would you recommend, basically what I'm saying is I think I kind of recommend trying Pyanodons to everyone. Would you recommend people try it with hard mode, or would you say that's something you should only try if you've already done Pi the normal way?
Quite the loaded question. I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because it's my project, but I would say if you're familiar with over overhauls, you finished maybe Nelius or space exploration, you can give hard mode a shot. But if it's your first time, maybe you're coming straight out of something simpler like Bobs and Angels, I would say just stick with the base pie. The base pie is extremely good. So
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer because I do think, yeah, the idea of having to deal with every byproduct could be a little bit much especially if you haven't done a lot of byproduct management in other mods. So, kind of back to more general thoughts, what do you like about Pyanodons? Why do you like Pi so much?
I think the reason I really like this mod pack is because it's just fun to work on. It's just fun. There's so many areas that I need constant improvement, which is sort of a motivator for me to make this as best as it can possibly be. And obviously, if I work on something so much, then I'm more inclined to play it, which I know is probably not a very useful answer for the viewers who are not developers of this game, but that's just my personal take on it.
Yeah, what are some of the mechanics that you really enjoy though in the actual gameplay?
I love the caravans are really cool. So you can actually have these creatures that travel between two outposts and deliver items, like a sort of proto train. We also have other cool stuff like the whole Digosaurus. You actually have these creatures that walk around and they actually mine ores for you, and then they go to this depot. All of the alien life stuff, I think is great.
Yeah,
There's all these mechanics that are just they don't exist anywhere in other mods, that only in Alien Life. So
I agree. The Digosaurus, when I had my first one going, I was like, "Oh my god, this is too cute. This is the best thing I've ever seen." Like he's got a little construction hat on and he goes and mines ore for me. This is the best thing ever.
it's so
Um,
good.
it's really good. Yeah, and like you said earlier with Pi himself, like the art of Pyanodons, and yeah, like there's certain things about it that when you compare it to like Industrial Revolution or space exploration, there's a difference. Like there's a different art design, but the detail and just the amount of like effort and like all the moving pieces in the Pi buildings are insane. And there's like over 200 different buildings, like assembler type buildings that all have their own animations and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just a different art style, but I think it works really well in its own bubble.
Yeah, I love it. I actually think if I were to rank my favorite like art for mod packs, I actually think Pi is my favorite. It's a hot take. I see a lot of other people put like Industrial Revolution at the top, and I think it definitely deserves to be in that conversation. But I think for me, just something about the Pyanodons art, I think it's the high detail, even though some of it might not be. I don't know if like the design direction is quite as cohesive maybe as something like IR3, but I think that just all the individual details are so fun. I feel like the Pyanodons art is like we wanted to have fun with this. It's not just about like, ooh, we have to make it look all perfect. Um like there's a lot of fun touches. The buildings have little like decals on them, like the pie symbol is on a lot of the buildings in different places. I don't know. It's just really cool. The pie art is really cool, and I think it's one of the reasons you even play the mod pack is to see all the cool stuff.
For me, my favorite part about the art in Pi is just he is not at all afraid to go huge. The buildings, some of them go like 22 by 22 tiles, and every single tile is detailed with some industrial process. So you get this huge, big, beautiful work of art, essentially. And it's animated too, which is just mind blowing.
It is really cool. Um, so with hard mode, I know you talked a little bit about it, but I kind of want to ask a few more questions. What inspired you to make it in the first place?
I saw a lot of people who were sort of going for a no voiding challenge where you just don't use the voiding entities, but you run into a problem because some processes you just can't do anything with. You have to store. And I was like, maybe I could make a mod that tailors to this specific niche. So I started with a no voiding mod. That's what it was called. And then how it goes is I just thought, this would be a cool feature. That would be a cool feature. And eventually I have this huge thing, and I'm like, wow, this is no longer my original vision. I better rename it. So I decided on Pi Hard Mode, and that's where we are today.
That's awesome. So, are bonus question: are you ever looking for ways to make it harder on purpose, or is the hardness simply born out of kind of I don't know. Does this make sense? Like removing things that are easy, or is it trying to make it harder?
So I add features because I think they would be fun. And it just so happens that more of the features that I've added have actually made the game more difficult. So this was sort of a coincidence that the game became harder, you could say.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Here's a question that'll put you on the spot. Have you ever beaten Pyanodons?
I have not. I have only gotten to the third science pack, which it's pretty embarrassing to say, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's embarrassing. I do think it's interesting though, because like you've probably played more Pi than most people, and it's like as a dev, you have to spend a lot of your time developing these things, but it's like it's such a big pack. I bet it's the same for Galactic New Horizons. I bet there's lots of people who develop it who have never actually like worked through the entire mod pack. What's your favorite in the amount that you've played? What's your favorite like section of the game or season of the game? Is it the beginning? Is it a certain tech level?
I think the thing that's kind of hard for me to answer because as soon as I start playing the game, I'm like, oh, this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. So I'm just 5 minutes later, I'm in VS Code fixing problems. But I guess my favorite part of the game, because I've played, I would say, vicariously through streamers and through you as well, through your series. Um, my favorite part of the game is definitely at sort of the logistics side here. Once you start to get into archives and the game really starts to come into its own with brains and all of these new features in alien life. I think that's when you get the maybe most compressed burst of Pyanodons, you could say.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's like what, 500 hours in, or how far in is that all that stuff?
That's about 250 hours, I would say.
Okay. Okay. So maybe doable then for the average person.
There
So,
was a
okay.
speedrunner.
What's that?
There was a speedrunner who beat the whole thing in 200 hours. So,
Oh my gosh, that's insane. Did they
yeah,
have the blueprints ready to go for everything?
they did. They had the entire Pi base planned out in a sandbox.
That's crazy. I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm not. I think I am going to beat Space Age in less than 200 hours, but not by that much. That's crazy. Okay, so just kind of just free talk here. What else would you like to share regarding like Pyanodon's development with us?
Um, that's a good question. You know, I guess when I started, I was thinking along the lines of, hey, we have this space exploration mod. Maybe I could make these two compatible. And then I never did that. And it turns out that actually someone else did. I don't know if maybe Red Rafe would be an interesting guest on this podcast, but he's actually gone through and made both of these two ginormous packs compatible with each other, which is just a humongous effort. Um, so that was something interesting, definitely.
So there's a full compatibility with Pi and space exploration.
There is. Not many people know, but it exists.
That is impressive. Go Red Rafe. So then on that note, space exploration, that's going to change a lot with space age, and I know Arendelle has said he has plans to like update space exploration, but I'm really curious. This is totally a side topic, but I'm really curious to see what happens with that.
Me too. I've been looking at the dev posts, so I'm sure that's going to be another time black hole for me as well.
For sure. What so okay, this is another question you may or may not be at liberty to answer, but what are the plans with quality in space age or in Pyanodons?
So this might be a little bit of a disappointing answer, but the current mood is that there's just no way to make it work. We're probably just going to blacklist it.
I actually don't think that's disappointing because I think Pyanodons already does a lot of what quality does on its own, right? It's got the multiple tiers of buildings, which there's no way to replace that with quality of buildings because you can't have different recipes for them. And you guys already have multiple tiers of modules, and you have the turret upgrades. I feel like you guys have already kind of done what quality tries to do.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true.
How do you feel about the quality mechanic as a whole? I've been asking every
It's so
guest this.
buggy. It's so buggy. In our base, we had this duplication glitch where we made, I think, like 10 million legendary copper plates from zero input. Basically, we had low density structures, and you craft those with just molten copper and molten iron. And it doesn't care. It's a fluid, so it doesn't care what the quality is. So you get these legendary low density structures for free, and then you can recycle these, and you have infinite steel, infinite legendary copper. And that's just like one of the huge number of quality exploits that we found.
And I think a lot of them have been taken out, but that one's definitely still in there. I saw the Reddit post. Yeah, because all you have to do is get legendary plastic to make legendary LDS in the foundries, but then you can recycle that legendary LDS and kind of just loop it.
Yeah.
What about the actual mechanic as a whole? Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you feel like it fits Factorio?
Oh, it's awesome. All the jankiness. It's just so fun to figure out. And like you have this factory that produces like a compressed belt of legendary science, and you feel like you're just I don't know. You've beaten Factorio multiple times over. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, that's cool. I've really enjoyed how much it feels like it adds kind of an extra goal onto things where it's like, oh, you've already done it, but what if you did it epic or legendary?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It almost feels like Factorio Infinite mode. You can just play forever. It's great.
For sure. What other thoughts do you have for us regarding Pyanodons?
I would say if you're on the fence, try it out. And if you ever get frustrated by some mechanic, or maybe like there's some part that you don't like, just install mods. Install more and more QL mods, and just get to a point where Pyanodons is tailored for you. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a cool approach. I've really enjoyed kind of that part about Pyanodons as you guys have been very, friendly towards quality of life stuff. I think there have been some other mod developers that have been a bit more I'll use the kind word of like restrictive in what they do and don't allow to be joined
Yes,
into their mod pack.
I could name names, but we'll save that.
Yeah, we won't do that here. Um, so uh, on the balance note, I think I've already said this, but one of the things I love the most about Pynodons is that you guys do give the multiple different recipes for the same output, like completely different production lines. But that can then lead to the recipes being too powerful, where that's the only recipe you only want to use, or you never want to use it because it's like, well, that's just too weak. How do you actually balance those together? And I know you said maybe that's more King Arthur's thing, but I'm curious if you guys, I don't know, how do you do that?
So recently we've opened up a GitHub mega thread where basically if someone has a grievance where this recipe would be never picked or this one would always be picked, they can just leave a note. And we've already gone through, I think, what, 10 or 50 of these and just resolved the issues. We also have other techniques like YAPSA has a price calculator where we can see, based on the algorithms, what does it think is a good recipe, a bad recipe, and also just common sense going through the Factoriopedia, seeing all the different options there. So there's lots of different techniques we've been using over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is your goal, I guess the question is your goal to make it so that you just remove the alwayses and the some and the nevers?
No, not necessarily, because sometimes you would say, this is a really bad recipe, but in the early game, it's your only one, so it has a place. We just want to
Right.
make sure that there's no recipe that you just look at once and then you just never put into a mission, right?
I see. So as long as there's still a use case for a player at some point along the playthrough, then that's good enough.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Awesome. Well, this has been really, really fun having you on the podcast. Pyanodons is such an interesting beast. Before we wrap up here, is there anything else you want to share with us or talk about?
Well, I mean, it's just been really great having this interview. I feel like I've gotten a lot of stuff off my chest, so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a blast. What? Okay, I have one final question, I guess that I think is interesting. What other mod ideas do you have for new mods?
Oh,
Because you seem like a dreamer, an artist.
I used to be a dreamer. I used to be an artist, and then Pi happened, and I realized this is a lot of work. So I'm just trying to stay in my lane. If I have too many branches, none of them will ever grow. So,
So Meraxis, your planet, is maybe the big one for now.
well, Meraxis actually could be part of Pi in the future. Maybe we'll see.
Ooh. I did.
Perhaps.
That's what I was wondering about when you mentioned it earlier, because I was like, I remember seeing that little submarine GIF on the Pi Discord, and I was like, oh, was that just you like posting your own thing, or was it Pi related? So it sounds like it's a little bit of both, maybe.
I would say it's a warm up for me to learn how the modding API works and get all this stuff implemented, and maybe one day, who knows?
That's sweet. Well, that's so great. I love that you guys are, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I just love Pyanodons. I think it's great, even though I've only put, a few hundred hours into it total. I'm very excited to tackle it again once I've kind of gotten Space Age under my feet. It certainly is on my short list for returning, because my season 2 kind of series, I only got like 100 hours in and I was really enjoying it. But I was like, I don't want to burn out on Pi right before Space Age comes out. So I had to take a break, but I'm really excited to get back to it. So yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap up episode 23 of The Factory Must Grow. As always, thank you for listening. If you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Kydax. Huge thank you to NotNotMelon for being here on the podcast. It's really been great. Where can people find you out in the internet world? Do you have any socials or anything?
Mods.factorio.com/notmelon. That's me.
And then on the Pi Discord as well, I guess.
On the Pi Discord, yes.
Awesome.
Also
Awesome.
GitHub. I'm always on GitHub.
Perfect.
One more thing. One more thing before we go. I
Yes.
have a question for you. Can you make a promise to me? Next time you start maybe, I don't know, season 3, would you be open to trying the spoilage feature?
Whew, that's putting me on the spot. I saw the post on the Pi Discord that you guys had added some spoilage, and then that it's an optional. And I think, given that you guys have been very what's the right word? Very intentional about which items to add spoilage to, I actually think I will, because so far I would say I've enjoyed spoilage as a mechanic in Space Age. The only thing I haven't liked is, and this is more actually how they balanced biochambers. I just don't like that you need nutrients everywhere that you want biochambers, because then you have this sort thing that was sort of self-contained, but now literally if you want to use biochambers, you have to bring in a whole spoilage chain.
Definitely.
Other than that, I've really enjoyed spoilage, so I think I'll promise you, yes, I'll turn it on.
All right. Well, I'll hold you to that.
Yeah, and so will all the listeners. Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the cast. It's really been fun. So first and third Sunday, we'll be streaming the cast again. So what's today? I always forget to actually put the date in the notes. So today's the 17th. So we will stream again on December 1st. If you guys have any ideas for guests or show topics, please head over to the Krydania Discord. There will be a link in the description. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Always remember, the factory must grow.
Goodbye.